Hello and welcome to this edition of Dr. Clark Reports. I'm your host, Gary Clark, and my guest is my longtime friend, Ms. Beverly McKenna, who is the co-founder of McKenna Museums here in the city of New Orleans. And greetings and welcome, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I've been trying to get you in the program for quite some time. I'm glad you were able to make some space and we were able to get you here.
I'm so glad to be here at this time. We have a lot of exciting things going on that I'm interested in sharing with your audience. So
one thing that really truly interests me is the work that you do in the community. But in particular, I'm really, and all of us are impressed and believe in the work that you do with respect to McKenna Museums. And you're the co-founder of McKenna Museums along with Dr. Dwight McKenna.
Yes.
McKenna, and I know that is a project that is near and dear to your heart.
Oh, it's near and dear to our hearts. It's one of our later projects. We have taken that on maybe within the last 15 years. But we're very excited. You know, people who know me know that my very favorite African proverb is, until the lion writes its own story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So I think all of our projects, when I look back over these 40 years now, are kind of centered or anchored in that proverb. From the newspaper, telling our own story,
Tribune,
the New Orleans Tribune,
yes.
telling our own story, to telling our own history, sharing that. So that's what we do, and it's very gratifying.
Well, it certainly is, because, I see you everywhere in the community and all over. If I don't see you, I read about the work, and I read about and see the work that you're doing. But let's talk initially about the nature of McKenna Museums, and you have two of them, and let's discuss them and tell them how they came about and their significance to you.
Well, we didn't start out purposely, intentionally to establish the museums. Dwight and I started collecting artifacts that were of our culture, black culture. I say when we were children, 40 years ago. We bought a painting, and it hangs in the museum now, and I love telling the story of it, that this was the first, and then it fueled our passion, and we went from that to two museums. We've bought documents, paintings, photographs, all the things that represent the material culture of people of color.
Yes, in particular, and let me get my pronunciation correct, La Museé de F.P.C. And F.P.C. stands for?
Free People of Color.
Free People of Color. Oh, yes.
And this is just one small aspect of black history that we felt the story had not been told. And so when we looked at our collection, the things that we had, it just kind of all came together. We were able just to curate, take, and place in order a history of people over 300 years. Even now, I think the story we tell at Le Museé begins with 1718, with the founding of New Orleans, and goes up to today. So we like to say that our story is the story that's told, that needs to be told, covering these tricentennial years.
And what are some of the artifacts you have in there that I know that's...
We have documents,
yes,
we have manumission papers that date back to 1761. That's the oldest one we have, where Governor Kellerick was giving freedom to one Francois Amedy. And we have that actual paper. We have papers in there which is representative of a woman purchasing her own freedom and that of her 15-month-old son for $500. And just to have that, I'm so proud. Perhaps that is my favorite piece,
yes.
Most valued piece. Emotionally, I have a hard time wrapping my head around it. The concept that you have to buy yourself. That people had to buy your freedom, buy your body, your soul, your intellect, everything, that you had to buy your freedom. And so our stories start from there. We have beautiful paintings, other documents, just everything. You have to come visit.
Oh yeah, and I've been there, and I know that to different on different occasions, and I know that it's impressive. Mm-hmm. And what stands in mind is something that all school kids and everyone should go to.
Everyone needs
yes.
to come through there, and I get my biggest. It's more gratifying to me that when I'm telling this story and sharing it with young people, junior high students, high school students, and they are so intent, soaking up the
yes.
story. And you can see them, Dr. Clark, walking maybe as they leave, walking with their shoulders back. You can tell that they're a little,
It gives them that pride and that inspiration.
Pull your pants up,
and that's part of that is part of what this is all about. The work that you do, and let's look at this. Your location is where?
With the Le Museé, it's located at 2336 Esplanade, which is in the upper section of historical Tribune. This is a neighborhood that was said to be one of the first neighborhoods founded by people of color in the country. So we're in the neighborhood. It's well documented that people who settled in Tribune have owned at one time or another 80% of the property in that area, going back to the Spanish colonial days,
yes.
which was in the mid-1700s, 1760s. So we've left our indelible fingerprints on everything in that area, everything in New Orleans.
Precisely, and that is it's a corner location as well,
right? Mm-hmm.
And I know that, and it's historic, and I like the structure, the building, all of that. You have that you have that feel.
Yeah,
yes,
we do. Right there across from what was the old John McDonough High School, and although there's no record of people of color actually owning that building before us, we know that we built it. We were the artisans, we were the craftsmen, we were the plasterers, that people built it. So we are connected to the area, to the actual edifice, and we belong there.
And the other museum? Yes.
The other museum is a museum of African American art, where we display the artwork of the famous artists, starting back with the so-called masters. We have tanners, we have banisters. These are the African American artists from the 19th century, and it goes up until the present, where we take pride in sharing space and the opportunities for exhibiting to young emerging artists. So we kind of cover the waterfront.
So I know art historians, this treasure chest for art historians,
it really
and then for those individuals who have a creative spirit, that's where you come, and and I'm glad that you're doing this, because art is leaving the school system. and I tell folks, the reason why you see so much, one of the reasons why you see so much graffiti is that you have so many creative people, and if they can't express it in the school systems and in extracurricular activities, then they have to express it somewhere. Yes.
So not only are we giving them that opportunity just to create, but also to exhibit. There haven't been historically a lot of places that welcomed, and people are trying to change now, but welcome the works of black artists. We have a story that I love to tell. Gustav Blasch is a young artist. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He's the one that did this series on Leah Chase.
Okay.
He did a wonderful series on Leah Chase, maybe about 5 years ago. No place to exhibit. Nobody was really excited about these wonderful works. So we were, fairly new, but come on and we will offer you space here. It was so well received by the public that the New Orleans Museum of Art eventually offered him a show, which was just fabulous. And guess what? Now his works hang in the Smithsonian.
Amazing. You see, and you were there, yes.
Because we were here, because we had the space. I believe in ownership. I believe another one of our heroes is Dr. Louis Charles Rudinez, who was the first publisher of a black newspaper in the South. L'Union, and also the New Orleans Tribune, after whom we take our name for the paper. But one of his quotes that I hang prominently in my space, it's time for us to be leaders ourselves. You know, time for us to step up, again, to tell our own story. We determine what's put out there about us.
And so
provide our own space.
This is part of that material culture that you speak of.
Absolutely.
I see that, and I guess this is something that, I mean, this is very basic and rudimentary, but for someone like me, what goes into acquisition when you decide this is what I like, or how do you decide that this is something which I like or I want to put in? I mean, yes.
Well, you know, first piece was a piece that I just loved. A lady who was obviously a servant, but her stance, her carriage, her poise in executing these duties of a subordinate, I fell in love with. At the time, and this was 40 years ago, she was $1,500. Well, guess what? $1,500 to me then was probably like $100,000 now, really. So I prevailed upon the proprietor of the gallery to let me have a layaway plan. So it took me a year and a half to pay off $10, $15. So it started from there. And you should never be ashamed. People will work with you. The artists, the gallery owners, people will, work with you to make it, give you terms. But in the meantime, we loved art, both of us, and we were history buffs. So we'd visit art galleries, we would visit artists in travels, and people come here after a while. Our reputations as collectors spread. So then if you had something that you thought we would like, you would bring that to us. And so it's just grown from there.
Through word of mouth. And this around the country and the world.
Right,
so
exactly.
Individuals know when they fly into New Orleans, they know, go to Esplanade.
Take this over there. Take this to the McKennas. This belongs over there.
Right. I mean, and it's great to have that sort of reputation, but it takes a while to build a good reputation like that.
When we look at no, it doesn't just happen. It would be impossible just to go out and do the collection, now. You couldn't, unless you were purchasing somebody's entire collection, because this has been a collection that has, for example, we are owners of a lovely daybed and armoire by Dutril Barjon, who is a man of color. His workshop, his carpenter, furniture maker, was in the 200 block of Royal Street. But the pieces are rare, very expensive now. But a collector who owned them, knew of what we did, the story that we told, and brought them to us. So that's how those came to our possession. So many different ways.
But speaking of many, you wear many different hats, and also with the New Orleans Tribune, as co-founder of the Tribune itself. And how is that coming along? Because that is indeed a powerful paper. It keeps everyone knowledgeable about what is taking place in the community and in the state and in the country. And tell us about the Tribune.
Well, we started that in 1985, so that's been around for a long while. But we came here and we felt that after Dwight had finished his residency at Howard University and we came here, we felt that, again, the daily newspaper was doing a terrible job in presenting, depicting, telling the story of black people. It was just oftentimes degrading, twisted stories, and it really helped to keep, served to keep a community divided.
Right.
It's important the images that we see that are presented, that we see of ourselves, that we show ourselves. So we thought that there was definite need for another voice. The Louisiana Weekly was here, which was a great paper. We admire them greatly. They've been in the business, over 75 years now. The Data News Weekly, which at that time was more of an entertainment paper. So we decided to do ours with a focus, with a monthly publishing schedule, which would then allow us to delve more deeply into the stories. And And so that's what we set out to do, and I'm very proud of what we've been able to do. I'm proud of us being that voice. We've attempted to be a voice of integrity. Guess what? We have not become a major we aren't a major financial success with the paper because, again, as you know, the bills are paid by the selling of advertisements. So people don't always want you to tell the truth, to tell the story. So it's been a struggle that way, but it's telling that story has also become more of a mission for us. So.
And it becomes a testimony that you give now, to say the least.
Yeah, it is. And of course, the whole print media, media is changing again, as you know, with electronics. Yes. So everything's changing, but we're still there. Yes,
and again, I would like to remind my viewing audience that I'm Gary Clark. I'm speaking with my longtime good friends, Ms. Beverly McKenna, who is the co-founder of McKenna Museums here in the city of New Orleans, and also with the New Orleans Tribune. But you are a person who is so civically engaged and so active in our community. But will you please tell everyone the Beverly McKenna story? Tell them where you're from, where you grew up, and the story that's brought you here.
I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. First of all, I feel like a New Orleanian. I've been here for 40 years, met my husband in school. We were students in Nashville. He was at Meharry and I was at Tennessee State. So we met there. Came back together in Washington, D.C. I was living there taking courses at Howard Graduate School. He was at
Mecca.
Right, exactly. He was doing a residency. We married in Washington. Our children were born in Washington. And of course, he was a dyed-in-the-wool New Orleanian, so I always knew that in marrying him, I would be coming to New Orleans, and I love it. I've loved every minute of it. I love the people here, and so I feel very much a part of this community. I'm a Midwesterner, however, by birth and rearing. I say I'm from Ohio. Never heard of that? I'm from a community of a city about the same size as Baton Rouge in the upper northeastern quadrant of Indiana, Fort Wayne, Indiana. But great ties in Ohio. My mother's people had been in Ohio since before the Civil War, so really a Midwesterner. And then went off to school at these various locations and places and ended up here.
Well, do this for us. Who are some individuals who influenced you along the way? Who were your personal and professional influences?
Well, first of all, my parents.
Oh, yes.
I think back of them and all that they did and all the ways they trained us and raised my sisters and I first of all, my father was really kind of a revolutionary activist. He was the first African American to be elected to the first one of two African Americans to be elected to the Indiana State Legislature way back in 1933. So that he had a great influence. They influenced me. They're the reasons why I'm a newspaper publisher today. I remember Dr. Clark growing up in a house where every Thursday or Friday, the newspapers from around the country, Chicago Defender, the Pittsburgh Courier, all of those papers came into our house, and my sisters and I, they lined our coffee tables. We were required to read those. And it wasn't like a punitive way, but my father, here, read this. Look what black people are doing around the country. This is
It kept you informed.
Because in those days, you can imagine, or you may not, but it's probably the same thing here. Black people were not covered in our daily paper in that town. But I bet in Baton Rouge.
In Baton Rouge, the black paper was the news leader. Is what they had. Yeah, the black paper. Yes,
a black paper, right? But I'm talking about in your daily papers.
No,
so
not in society, not in culture, and with the largest black university in the city,
right? Exactly,
the state and the country, actually.
So we grew up. Look what this judges doing in Chicago, you know, from the Chicago Defender. We would read about the issues, the problems faced by black people. So I loved journalism and writing, and I knew that I wanted to be a journalist from a little girl. My parents, although they wanted us to read and be aware of what was happening around the country, they didn't want me to major in journalism because they said I would never be able to get a job at that time. And this was true. I couldn't get a job.
And right, it is about sustainability and working,
right.
Yes.
So I was majored in English. And when I couldn't get an internship one summer, I couldn't, you know, they said, the woman told me, honey, we've never had a colored reporter. So I switched my major from journalism to English and did that, but somehow always returned to jobs in public relations, public information, you know, something that had to do with writing, and just feel very fortunate that when we came here, my husband and I say we share our life views. So he was interested in doing the paper here as well. So we started that, the paper.
It's a major impact.
Right.
And the beauty of it is it's monthly, and it stays on the coffee table. It stays there.
People read it.
People read it and share it.
Right. So,
yes.
So we like to think that through the paper we've made a difference. How long it will be around, I can't say. I don't know. But we like to think that we've made a difference for these 30 years.
Well, I can testify the difference is there, the impact is there. And true to the spirit, your civic engagement and these passions that you have, what really pushed you to being civically involved?
Again, I go back to my parents, and my father would always tell us, you know, you need to be involved in the community.
Yes.
You need to be involved in the community. I remember them. My parents being charter members of the Urban League at that time, bringing, you know, they brought an affiliate of the Urban League. I was a little bitty girl. But when the Urban League first came to Fort Wayne, you know, my father was on the board. I remember them speaking. They thought it was very important. So
you were in that environment all the time.
Yeah,
and
it wasn't just, you know, it was just the way you were supposed to do. You were supposed to whom much is given, much is required. And I think they built their philosophy and their way of living that way. Another thing, just in the way in which, in the museum, in my museum now, there is, in a prominent place, a picture of my great-grandmother. And I tell this story as well, but it was my father's grandmother who was born enslaved in Giles County, Tennessee, in early 1860s. So, although, of course, I didn't know her, but my daddy would relate stories, tell us about her, and you would think about her travails, her obstacles, but where we had come from.
Right.
Where we had come from. So I look on this wall, the picture of my great-grandmother, and it hangs in the museum. I'll show you the next time you come. But then to think that 65, 70 years later, my father was graduating from Meharry. So I think, and that's your story. It's a story that black people share. But when you think back, all that we have overcome, we've come a long way. And I think, again, the story that we tell is we are people to be celebrated.
Precisely. And you look at the landscape now in our community, in our city and state community. What does it say to you?
Well, I'm very saddened. I'm frightened. I think racism is rampant. It's really sad because I think back again, Poor People's Campaign in 1968 in Washington, D.C. I was a young girl running around D.C., you know, but participating in that. You look now and so many things have not, although things have changed in some ways, in many ways they haven't.
It's still the same.
Still the same, and that makes me sad. 50 years, you know.
And one would think, and we've just, and this year we've celebrated the 50th anniversary of the death assassination of Martin Luther King,
which was at that time,
and Robert F. Kennedy.
Absolutely. And so you think of the temper, the tone, and the racism to me is, these people are just so much, they're emboldened and just in your face. It makes me sad.
And I know
and Mangry too.
Precisely, and I know that there you get the artists who come to you, and I know it's expressed in their art. Do you see it manifested in some of these
the pieces that people do? Sure, because that's reflective of our. That's what they do, telling a story, just with the paintbrush. So I have a beautiful painting, the most recent one that we received, that we've purchased at the Uptown Museum, of a gentleman. You have to come see it, but with a flag laying across his, chest and his groin, and he's just obviously enduring. He's enduring. It's so powerful. I think it's called Injustices, but it's the story of our struggle. This has been depicted so beautifully, so powerfully.
Yes.
Ulrich Jean-Pierre, he's a very highly regarded artist with Haitian descent who lives here, but yeah, you're right.
Right, Jean-Pierre, right, I know the work, right, yes, right. Yes. And one thing about the Haitian art is that Haitian artists, I like Haitian art, period. In fact, of all of the art in the Caribbean, that's my favorite. Right. And for some reason, you feel a good connection to their depictions.
Right. Well, you have to come visit, since I know that you have to come. And we have a one room at the Uptown Museum, which we call the Haitian Room, because we've really been patrons of Ulrich's, and his paintings are beautiful.
Yes, and I remember years ago when I was in Haiti, I liked, there's some work down there, the carvings and woodwork. And they have truly great artisans.
Absolutely.
Now, we have about 2 minutes or so remaining, and I'd like to know your vision for McKenna Museums and the Tribune over the next few years. Where do you want to carry it?
Well, I would like for us just to be able to do the same thing. We don't get grants. People look at, if I told you the amount of monies that we get from outsiders or outside groups, we don't get a lot of money. $1,000 here, a couple $1,000 there. So no, we don't get that. It's a struggle. It's because it's an expensive proposition. But again, instead of coming here with a big diamond ring on, this ring, I think, came from TJ Maxx. So that's how we invest our money, for real.
And this is your passion project.
So, right. So instead of that, it's sacrifices. There are sacrifices, but we would like to think that it will continue. I hope that our children, and I'm sure they will, step up to the plate to support what it is we've built.
Yes, and again, I want to thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And I would like to thank my viewing audience for tuning in. As always, it's been a pleasure.